I think you need a bit of help in writing a good conclusion. And that's what I'm going to focus on this morning. I want you to find out, I want you to realise what's in a good conclusion. Look at this one. The graph went up in steps. Well, it did. Group 1, your group, could only dissolve half a spoonful of salt. The best was Group 8, because they managed to dissolve 4 spoonfuls of salt. It was because they had the most water at the start of the experiment. We were Group 5, and we got 2.5. I think that might be 2.5 spoonfuls of salt in our experiment. And we found that the amount of water that we used did affect the results. Now it's good, but I can get a better one than that. If you hadn't done that experiment, if you didn't know what this experiment was about, and you just walked into this classroom now and sat down, what would that conclusion tell you? Just read it now as if you haven't done the experiment. Somebody else wrote this one, and I think that this is much, much better. Think about why. Here's the next one. I'll read it out just in case it's shining at the back. It says, the results show a pattern. The group with the least water dissolved the smallest amount of salt. The group with the most water was able to dissolve the most salt. The results show, and this is the key sentence, we've got to use describing words, words that end in ER. The results show that the greater the amount of water used, the larger the amount of salt that had dissolved. Okay? That's the pattern, that's the trend. Why is the second one better than the first one? All right? What I'd like you to do now is this. Having had a look at what's a bad conclusion and a good conclusion, I'd like you to share your ideas with the person or 2 or 3 people next to you. Just for a minute or two, that's all, just for a minute or two, and see if you've come up with the same ideas about why it's good, why it's better than the first example. Now, after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each table to come up with something about the second one which makes it better than the first.
The second one is better than the first because it tells us that there's a pattern which shows it goes up in steps. It gives more scientific words. Yeah. It's in sections. Explanation is split into sections.
Yeah, put information about this experiment using more scientific words and a greater, large solution soluble.
The group with the least water dissolved the least amount of water. It actually gives it
actually tells you what they've been doing. Fills out space between water particles.
No, it explains it in a simple way.
The amount of water did affect the results, but it didn't say how it did.
Second conclusion is the best.
How it does it somewhere
more detail what the graph shows.
How it does it somewhere.
It also describes
how it does this.
How
it does it.
What I'd like you to do is elect a spokesperson, somebody from each group, if you like, who can say a little bit about what they think makes a good conclusion.
The second conclusion is the best because it explains in more detail what the graph shows. It also describes how it does this and why. The first conclusion only tells us a few results and doesn't tell us why it does this.
That's great. Superb.
The second one's got a better explanation and it's like divided into sections, and the second one talks about how graphs were laid out and stuff. And the second one like uses scientific words and makes things a lot clearer than the first one does.
So it's something to do with clarity and using scientific words and describing trends.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tanya. That's good.
Our groups come to a conclusion that the second is better. The second tells us more information about the experiment and uses more scientific words. For example, greater, larger, soluble solution. And the second conclusion also tells us that the more water there is, the more salt will dissolve. It explains why the more salt dissolves when there is more water by saying the salt fills up the spaces between the water particles. So the more water there is, the more spaces there are between the particles.
Brilliant. So in the second conclusion we've got some science which is missing from the first conclusion. Well recognised, well done. And the last one, is it Carly, spokesperson? See if she can add anything else to what we've got so far. Okay?
Our group thinks that the second conclusion is better because it gave a scientific explanation and it also used paragraphs, punctuation, and also uses words to expand the information and make the paragraphs longer.
I like that one. I also like the bit that it's divided up into 3 bits. We've got to now distill everything that we've heard from each of the 4 groups and put it into words. Why was the second one better than the first, right? Now then, I'll put it on the board to help you because in a short while you're going to be doing some work for me. Okay? So let's look at the board. First bit we do. 3 sections, 3 distinct bits to a good conclusion. The first one, look at the table of results, look at the pattern, look at the trend. Let's describe it. Let's describe the pattern or the trend. What does the graph show us? What does the table show us? What have we found out from the information? Okay? Does the graph go up? Does it go down? Okay, could be as simple as that. Yeah? That's the first bit. That's the first element of a good conclusion. Next, using those O words, let's draw conclusions. What does it tell us? As this goes up, that goes down. As this increases, that increases. What have we found out? Use the O words. And the final bit, science. Let's try and explain. Let's explain the trend, the pattern, using science. This is the last bit for today. I'm going to come round with a large piece of paper for each group. Yeah? So there'll be a nice big piece of paper, somebody with a nice hand for writing. Can you write down, and listen, can you write down a good conclusion to this table of results? Now, don't just write the first thing that comes into your head. Remember, as a group, you've got to think about 3 things. Is there a pattern? If so, describe it. What does the pattern tell you? Draw conclusions. And finally, if you can bring a bit of science into it, well, that's an even better conclusion. So discuss it within your group. Remember to write, as Carly said, 3 paragraphs. And on this piece of paper, come up with a nice group conclusion. I don't want the one who's got the loudest voice to say, right, write this down. I want everybody to contribute.
Yeah, but you've got to say that when they collide together, they dissolve. So when the particles, salt and the water particles join together, they dissolve.
So stand up.
Oh wait, no, you stand up part.
Yeah. The heat of the water affects how fast and slow the salt particles move into the water particles, something like that.
Temperature.
The faster the salt dissolves.
It takes to dissolve.
It takes some time to make.
The particles move faster when the water is warmer.
Yeah. No, it says when the water is warm, the water particles move faster. We said them lines in there, so that's part of them.
No, because that's what we found out, and that's our conclusion. Just summarizing that up in our second paragraph. And that's our scientific explanation.
We've got 3 paragraphs up. 1, 2, 3, the last part.
Pattern, the conclusion, and the explanation.
Here we go.
Yes. So what we found out the hot water.
Okay, you've now had enough time. What I'd like you to do is this. From your group, can you elect somebody with a nice, loud voice who's prepared to tell everybody else in the room what they think is a good conclusion to this experiment? That's the experiment about temperature and the solubility of salt. Same for this group. Each group, if you can elect somebody who can say what they think is a good conclusion. Now, I hope you've been listening today. I hope that you've used what we put on the first blackboard, dividing it into sections. What's each section intended to do? The patterns, the trends. The key bit in the middle, what have you found out? And then to finish it all off, the scientific explanation. Okay?
We found out that the hotter the water, the quicker the salt dissolved, and the cooler the water, longer it took for the salt to dissolve. The cooler the water particles, the slower the salt particles move, and the hotter the water particles, the faster the salt water move.
When the water is hotter, the particles move faster, so the salt dissolves quicker. When the water is cooler, the particles move slower, so the salt dissolves slower.
Is that it? Hey, I like that one.
The cooler the water, the longer the salt takes to dissolve.
Good.
The hotter the water, the faster the salt dissolves. We conclude that the greater the temperature, the faster the salt dissolves.
Good.
The warmer the water, the less time it took the salt to dissolve. We conclude that the warmer the water, the quicker the salt dissolved. When the water is cool, the particles move slower. When the water is warm, the water particles move faster.
I hope everybody now in the room knows how to write a good conclusion. Remember those elements. 3 paragraphs, look at your spelling, look at the punctuation, and if you can include those 3 elements, I am sure that when I mark your homework and when I give you it back, every single one of you can come up with a good conclusion. Agreed? Yeah. Agreed. Okay, thanks.